Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here and to see our faces on the elevator. That was cool. We're going to talk a little bit about our organization because it's a unique kind of structure that's kind of evolved organically as a business model. And also because, in the context of interaction design, the design of our organization is very much a surface for or a material for the design of interactions, whether those interactions are within our company or whether they're between our company and our clients and then the customers that they then serve. So there's quite a multitude of interactions kind of at play within any kind of surface like a company. And so we thought we'd start there by describing what we do, and then we'll talk a little bit about our philosophy and how we think about the work we do with our clients. So yeah, my name's Elie, this is Hugh, and do you want to describe this orb?
Yeah, so garden3d is a collective of creative companies, and all of the companies that are in our orbit are all sort of like brought together by sort of like some sort of philosophical through line that I couldn't really kind of put into words. I guess it's that the pursuit of human coordination is a noble one, and like if we can figure out how to coordinate really well as a group, we can make really cool things. I'm also just unemployable generally, so I don't really have another option. So we've been building these sort of various different companies for a long time. And I think, one of the questions we get asked a lot is, why do you not just have one company that does a lot of things? And I think it's because we think that it's really important that when groups form, that they're able to sort of like develop their own norms and develop their own points of view and points of difference, and not sort of like feel like they're sort of like being absorbed into a blob, but rather are unique and are able to sort of like form that. So by giving them a name and giving them a label and giving them a brand, they're able to, kind of develop some autonomy that maybe like a big company that does a lot of things don't really lend to their groups. So
yeah, self-expression, discovery, the ability for all of these companies to express themselves as individual entities means that the people who are looking for them will be able to find them more easily as well. So Sanctuary Computer and 29 were founded in 2015. Sanctuary Computer is the company that Hugh founded, a software development company. Kind of core specialties being apps, web apps, native apps, IoT technology like the light phone, or like Mill, which is a smart bin for kitchen waste. Also like really gorgeous e-commerce sites, and what's the last one?
Oh, I don't know.
We do one more kind of specialty.
Yeah. Native apps.
We got them all, I think. I think we got
anything
them all.
with code we can do.
Yeah, and then 29 is really focused on visual design. So thinking about everything from the beginning concepts of a product to how that translates into its visual manifestations as a brand, and then becomes interactive through some sort of web interface. Seaborne is our sustainability consultancy. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And Index is our community space, which is on Walker Street between Center and Baxter. It's about 23 minutes by subway, so you should come by if you haven't been. And then Cocoon, Light, and Mill are three brands that we have taken equity in through our client services relationship. And we continue to work with all three of these brands on a retainer basis, and they're three of our kind of favorite clients. So that's what the garden3d ecosystem looks like today. Though within this framework, we can add and change and develop businesses by the same kind of administrative logic that exists today. So yeah, the business is an interactive surface. And on that surface, garden3d might look like any other creative agency business, but really, we think of garden3d as a demonstrative case study for how to run a non-oppressive, non-extractive, liberatory, inclusive, and empowering creative company inside of late capitalism.
most businesses are about making money and the people come second, but we think that if we can focus primarily on building stuff for humans, including the organization itself, then really good work and success will kind of follow from that. So yeah, philosophically we put the person first, and then we expect money to probably come later and bolster that whole ecosystem, and that's tended to be true so far.
I tweeted at our company retreat, it's hard to believe that this is a profitable company. And then my dad replied, maybe this is the reason it's a profitable company. And that's kind of become part of our raison d'etre, I guess. People first and profit follows. So yeah, when we focus on this human-centric kind of model for building a business, how does that actually manifest in the day-to-day structure of our organization? We like to think of this as a way to systematically nurture everywhere that our company interacts with the people that work for us and with us and that we work for. So maybe you want to...
Yeah, so we're going to go through and show, like, in sort of real brass tacks how we actually do this, and what the policies look like that sort of nurture both the people internal to the organization, but then, you know, if the brand or our organization is a boundary that interacts with other parts of the world, then how we nurture each one of those points of the boundary as well. So the first and most important thing that we rolled out in 2015 was our profit share. It actually hasn't really changed at all since then. Luckily enough, we got the math pretty close to correct. And some of the core tenets of our profit share program is that it's paid in December. It's based on how long you've been at the company. It has equal founder participation, which is an important part of the design, which is to say, in our organization, the founder is not treated any differently from a financial perspective to anyone else in the to anyone else. And what that means is that, like, if the primary means of improving everyone's quality of life is the founder having to improve their own means of quality of life, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats, which is just a very important point of the profit share calculator. Without that, it's kind of just like a fancy bonus program. Mm-hmm. But it's also algorithmic. We published it on GitHub. It's been rewritten in a couple of different languages. And everything about it is transparent and auditable, both within the organization and, for a long time, we're publishing it externally as well.
You can play around with the profit share calculator if you're interested in how something like this could work. It's at profit.sanctuary.computer, and it's just a little tool that we built in order for it to be easier for us to communicate internally how this thing works. Transparency is obviously a huge part of profit share, but we'll kind of get to that later. And it's also a fun way to kind of demonstrate to others how they might be able to logistically calculate how to do profit sharing.
I know at least a couple studios who've forked it and deployed it for themselves, which is cool. Do you want to do this one?
Yeah, worker ownership. A few years ago, Hugh decided that he didn't want to be the only person to shoulder the burden of running an extremely stressful company. And so he and the founder of our design studio came up with a way of offering deterministic entry to a worker ownership program. So essentially the way that works is if you've worked at our company for more than 4 years, and if you're senior level 4 or above in our skill levels, then you are automatically a part owner of our company. And currently we have 5 associates, we call them? I think 6.
I think 6 plus me.
Yeah, no, 6 including you.
Oh.
What this looks like on a day-to-day basis is that we have essentially an advisory committee or a committee of really invested team members who can really parse the difficult conversations out together in community rather than those responsibilities really falling just on a single person. This represents an 80% pool of all garden3d ventures, so that's basically almost all of our, all of the value of the businesses that we operate, plus the businesses that we have equity in, and it vests over 4 years. So that's
we should be adding a few people to this year, and I think like over like a 5-year time span, there's probably going to be about 20 or 30 worker owners, and hopefully at that point I'm divested to like almost nothing in the company because I want to have less responsibility.
Also, we've been thinking a lot about what our people are going to need long term to stay at our company for decades and decades, hopefully. And, we really want this program to be as accessible as possible to the people that work in our company so that they can build meaningful wealth through their time working for us, and really, set on a pathway toward financial sustainability for themselves. So we're measuring our plans in decades. A really important other aspect of the way that our company works is that we set our own salaries. So everybody at the company uses this very sophisticated Google Doc to essentially assess their skills on junior, mid, experienced, mid, senior, and lead tiers for each craft. So the different crafts in our organization are design, development, communications, but then we also assess skills on like studio impact and like collaboration. And so essentially every time you think you've grown in your career, you can request a skill tree review, and you can choose peers that have worked with you to also, do the skill tree review with you, and everybody essentially runs down and assesses where you fall in this matrix. And what that does is it really creates a culture of self-advocacy and peer advocacy. So people really learn how to speak up for themselves and to assess their own skills in ways that are really honest, we find. And everyone is paid the same per skill band, regardless of the discipline that you're working in. So designers get paid the same as developers, get paid as people who work in admin. Everybody gets paid on the same skill bands. And we made the decision a few years ago to make our salaries completely transparent. So everyone has an understanding of where they fall within the general population of our company.
Okay, cool. So we have within our company what we call a moral compass, which is a document that we published on Substack that kind of like determines what types of clients we will and won't engage with. And basically it's kind of just anyone that you wouldn't really want to work with. Greenwashers, cheap mass-produced products, extremist or hateful politics, anyone tied to claims of moral turpitude, dark money, exploitative behavior, harmful or addictive substances. But it's interesting that when we put this up, we realized there were a lot of leads that we were getting that actually did kind of like have, these attributes. And since we've been doing this, we've probably turned down somewhere between $1 to $3 million worth of potential work, but we've kind of stopped counting at this point.
It's every couple months, probably, that we turn down a lead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a decision that we make transparently and together, with folks weighing in on, whether something justifies a claim of moral turpitude, for instance.
It's hard to navigate, but
yeah.
I think it's good.
Our experiments process, in an organization like ours, we don't have HR, we don't really have like strong structural leadership models. And so how do we come up with company policies? We decided that it would make sense for an organization like ours to allow anyone who works at our company to suggest a new way of doing things, whether that is a 4-day work week or a new parental leave policy. Anyone at our company can come up with what we call an experiment, can draft it in a way that everyone else at the company has a good understanding of what this experiment is intended to do, and then we try it. And if no one at the company can prove that it's not safe to try, then it becomes our policy. And it's become a really interesting way for folks across the organization to shape like sometimes it's very minute, sometimes it's very small things, and sometimes it's, massive things like the 4-day work week, for instance. A small example could be like, this rotational buddy system. So like, having a work friend to check in with on a periodical basis, for instance. They can be like small cultural changes, or they can be like very large systemic changes.
Another important sort of object in our company schema is the working group. So in our company, anyone can create a working group. It's just a group of folks who are interested in having broad discussions about, a topic that maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should inside of our organization. And it's like, these are like very important petri dishes for the experiments concept that Elie was just talking about to develop. So these are safe spaces. These are places where minority concerns can build a voice, build a perspective that can be brought to the company. And usually experiments are sort of where these types of conversations culminate. A lot of the most interesting experiments that have happened at our organization that have become policy change have come through working groups. So we're big proponents of these spaces.
Inclusivity, equity, and diversity, we reverse it, because we believe that when you prioritize inclusivity, equity, and diversity are natural, happen naturally. And we prioritize this because we know from lots of experience that diverse groups make better creative work. So we write a yearly DEI report where we capture demographic data from all of the people that work for our company. We look at who's leaving, we look at who's moving up in skill levels, we look at what patterns are emerging through the demographic data of our 30-person company. I mean, this is a small sample size, but it is important to us to understand these patterns and trends if they're happening. Our DEI work originated in a working group called the DEI Working Group. And that is where we also wrote our code of conduct, which is a really robust and thoughtful guide to behavior on many different levels, not just like what happens if you what messing up looks like. It's also what doing well looks like, and how it's a guide as much as it's a caution. We've created lots of different artifacts and documents for how to integrate DEI into many aspects of our work, whether that's how to use inclusive language, what to do as a situation, whether that's with a client or with another coworker, escalates. And doing this work has been the combined efforts of many voices over many years. So it's not really ever finished. It's always kind of evolving and in progress, and informed by the people who are using our organization every day. So we're going to get a lot more parents this year.
Yeah. So our parental leave policy is really important to us. So just high level, it's 16 weeks paid. You can use that budget however you would like. And there's no differentiation between the primary and secondary caregiver. This is, again, one of the big policies at our company that came through our experiments process, and it just went into effect without anyone feeling that it was unsafe. And now it's become a really important mission inside of our company to ensure that we consistently have enough money in the bank and strong enough financials that we can support people who are becoming new parents. And I don't know, I think there's probably been about four or five kids by the end of this year who will have been supported by this.
Maybe more.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Alicia's on round 2.
Yeah.
So transparency is obviously such a huge part of all of this. And a culture of open source that really originated with a lot of the software development work that Hugh was doing even before he started kind of building this as an organization. You might have noticed that a lot of what we were showing on screenshots were Notion docs. our entire company works on Notion, and everything is fully open and accessible to anyone who has an email address that ends in @sanctuary.computer. Not only that, we built this platform. This screenshot in the background here is a sort of intranet system that pulls financial data and demographic data and like basically any data that we want it to pull into one dashboard. We call it Stacks. And basically it shows us how much money is in our bank account at any given time, what our estimated salary runway is at any given time, and like actually all sorts of other data. The data that it shows is important, but what's really important is that anyone in our organization can access that at any time to understand how our business is doing. And with a profit-sharing organization, that kind of transparency is really important because, if you're a developer on a project and somebody, something's not going well, like you're not just a developer, like you're a stakeholder. You are, a concerned party. And so making sure that everyone has access to the same information is especially important when everyone is sharing the profit at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the point here is that it's all well and good to be transparent, like transparency is a good thing, but if you don't have the same level of, let's say, financial literacy among a group, then you're kind of like not necessarily like giving people the agency that comes along with the transparency. Yeah. So like part of the work here is to make the transparent aspects like less raw and more actionable for the group so that the group can then therefore be more autonomous. So yeah. Also, we put our bank account login in one password so that anyone can log in and see what's in the bank, which is like, very scary to be the only person who knows what is in the bank. So now everyone does.
But it's shared responsibility.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
When only one person knows, then it's only one person's responsibility. But when everyone has access to that information, we're all working towards those common goals.
Oh yeah, okay, so managing is a major skill. We don't have at our company any project managers. We don't have anyone whose title is project manager. And that's because we just kind of believe that if you're making the work and you understand the intricacies of the work and you know how to send a well-crafted email, then you have all of the tools to keep a project on track. And honestly, you're the best person to speak to your clients about your project because why would you add a translation layer to that? So high level, this is kind of cool because everyone at our company learns to be like a mini business, like an individual business unit that can manage themselves and create great work at the same time. It's kind of a no-brainer, but essentially, by having project managers, you're essentially sort of telling creative people like, oh, you're not able to do this. You're not able to get your head around this. And we just think that creates these classes inside of an organization where certain people may lean into sort of, let's say, information hoarding or, these types of sort of like ways to maybe make themselves feel more important. And that there's this like subtle kind of toxicity that happens when you have like a management layer and a labor layer. So we think that's really important. But then, our budgets are tighter because there's no like management. And long story short, the people doing the work actually send the emails. So pretty important.
We're big on paying people to not work. We don't have a picture for this, but if we did, it would be like an awesome picture of everyone's paid time off. We close the studio, or we close the business the last Friday of every month. We call it Freedom Friday. It's inspired by Yvonne Chouinard, Let My People Go Surfing. The office is closed for 2 weeks at the end of the year. We celebrate or observe 10 public holidays. They're not all celebrations. 7 days sick, mental health. We also give time off for activism. So if you want to go to a protest or participate in a political, action in some way, you can use a paid day off for that. And then the really great one is that we give everyone who works at our company a 6-week paid sabbatical every 3 years. We have noticed that burnout is like an extremely real and scary thing, and to continue to, give people work without break is a really great way to break people with work. So Yeah, the sabbatical is a huge part of this philosophy. We already talked about parental leave, and through the experiments process, we also came up with our optional 4-day work week at 80% pay, which is a really cool program if, for instance, you're not yet eligible for a sabbatical, but you're feeling that potential burnout. You want to, opt in for a little while, opt back out. It's the kind of thing that people kind of flex in and out of. I did it for a while, and it was awesome.
We do a lot of environmentalist stuff as much as you can do as a creative agency in New York City. Our company is carbon negative dating back to 2015. We actually offset 50% more carbon than we calculate. We release a sustainability report every year. We give a rebate on work to sustainable companies and companies that are willing to commit to like rigorous and substantive sustainability. We don't give it to greenwashers. We also do some of our own sustainability consulting under a brand called Seaborne in our umbrella. So yeah. You want to do this one?
No, that's you. That's
okay.
All you did.
All right. And so the all of this is well and good, right? But if like we were barely scraping by, or like the company wasn't sort of like doing anything like interesting, then it wouldn't really have any sort of like, it wouldn't have any sway, I think. But these are some of the clients that we've worked with under this model, and you can see a little bit of the work in the background. So yeah, just a lot of like big tech, and we haven't really been excluded from anything of that nature because we're so weird.
You'll notice we have Parsons and Pratt up there, but not SVA. So if you know anybody,
that's SVA, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. And then this is our company as of today in numbers. So we've done almost $30 million in total revenue
since 2015.
Since 2015, yeah, we've paid about $2 million to workers in profit share, and then $22 million in salaries and benefits. We've given over $100K to environment and charity. The goal is to get this number to $1 million in the next 5 years. And yeah, we've turned down a bunch of work due to moral reasons. And we've never taken investment, but any numbers that sort of like don't add up here, that's just money that we've reinvested into our business, or just like raw expenses, like software licenses and stuff like that. So, and yeah, a lot of our profit and loss statements are actually on GitHub. We haven't published one for maybe a few years now, just because we've been lazy, but yeah, you can kind of like audit a lot of this on GitHub.
We've never fired anyone for money reasons, which we think of as founder greed. No one's ever worked for free at our company, and it's crazy that I have to say that. And as a consequence, and probably like endemic to a lot of these policies, our hiring pool is diverse and overflowing, and we have come to understand that this is because what we really offer at our company is a creative path that feels like self-actualization. So we're going to talk a little bit now about how this logic of our business and how we have structured our business kind of feeds into the work that we do externally with our clients. And a lot of what we're going to be referencing today pulls from an article that we published in our Substack last year called Expansive Brands. And, I know you guys are interaction design students, and so you're not always thinking about brand, but something that we like to think of is, or that we like to say is, we really believe that your product is your brand. And so what that means is that, as above, so below, the brand is an expression of what the product means and what the product is. And so to separate the two things is it's sort of pointless.
Yeah, I think when we say brand inside of this concept, we're talking about the container that houses the idea, the product, the people who work at the brand, the people who are around the brand, like the super fans and loyalists. We're not talking about a logo here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the idea.
Wait, we should say this part.
Oh.
Yeah, the sort of philosophy of all of this is that we build brands governed by a similar logic to the way that we run our company, and that is that we believe that a company must accept its place in society as a type of public and cultural institution. You were here. You can describe it.
Yeah. So these are some photos from like early days of our company when we were just like 5 people coding on a roof on Bowery, and this is kind of what some of the work looked like around that time. I think everyone kind of remembers this era of graphic design. We kind of, it's pretty easy to understand this as the millennial era of like DTC branding. We participated in that, absolutely. But we found that this like period started to fall over sometime around like 2020 when everyone was kind of forced inside and everyone's like social media feeds like became absolutely inundated with the same looking brand like every second item on the timeline. And compounding with that, like we just started to see brands getting canceled like all over the internet on like TikTok, and it kind of became pretty clear that this like broad thesis of millennial branding was like coming to an end. And I think it was because like, a lot of us originally understood this era of like this type of branding to be like, hey, this is an alternative to the big brands, right? Like by interacting with one of these brands, like you're kind of in the know. You found it on a social media feed, and it's not like Colgate. It's this like niche toothbrush, And there was kind of like a salvation that was kind of built into the way that these brands talked. And I think that like that really just kind of came crumbling down when like people realized that you could just like learn about these brands and learn that they're just as evil, if not worse, than like some of the big brands in terms of like quality control and like the ingredients that they were putting into these things.
I will just say that this was an awesome time to run a creative studio. Like everyone was coming to our company with ideas for the Uber of toothpaste, like you said, or whatever. The product, the direct-to-consumer movement was massively lucrative for small studios and especially like New York City agencies. I think a lot of these companies really felt like they were made for us, by us, and were being sold to us at the same time. So we really started to think about like our complicity in some of the wastefulness and the unethical underbelly of a lot of this kind of millennial branding. We realized that we'd become this razor sharp tool for MBAs with rich parents and a market gap to trash our dying planet on an ever accelerating hyper global scale so that they might get laid by saying that they're a founder on Hinge. So that was
spot the lie. Spot the lie.
So that was a little bit of a turning point for us, and we really had to think about what kind of company we wanted to be and who we wanted to represent through our work. And what we were thinking about, and what the question that we turned to at this time was, in the face of such powerful skepticism and exhaustion, our own included.
Oh yeah, I couldn't get out of bed. I was so sick of it.
How can we ever hope to build a brand that people actually like?
Yeah. Wait, do you want to? I don't know what this.
Yeah, I could do this one. Yeah. So this slide kind of refers to the traditional touch points that brands use to communicate to consumers. So whether those touch points are things like price or design language or look and feel or function or shopping experience, these are all the sorts of things that businesses and companies would come to our studios to hone and really go to market with. And so we got really good at helping, consulting with brands and helping them develop these different aspects of how they wanted to represent themselves. But we began to feel that in order for a brand to really hold its own in this new market, in this new era of consumer culture and political climate, a brand really needed an expanded language in order to justify its existence. And so the new expanded language that we're going to be talking about today have to do with these 5 kind of principles. And those principles are transparency, social responsibility, community first action, giving back, and environmentalism.
And a big part of why we're quantifying this and going to great lengths to sort of really spell out the touch points that we care about is that we've found that like the founders that we'll work with won't see these newer touch points as things that they really have effect over or are their responsibility. And that when we ask, when we were first starting to ask founders like, hey, why does your company actually deserve to exist? Like, no one could really answer that question, It was kind of like, oh, we're just trying to make more money. It's like under late capitalism, the most holy thing you can do is make a company and sell a product. Mm-hmm. And like, we are questioning that logic. And yeah, what we found is that we needed to actually like substantively offer like an answer to that same question and say like, well, what if you did this? What if you did this? These are ways to justify why you deserve to clutter up my social media timeline.
So now brands need to demonstrate to their customers that their growth is in service of our, meaning like us as consumers, needs and concerns. And every day, an expansive brand aims to offer an updated, legible answer to the most prescient and urgent question of today's new consumer. Hey brand, why are you even here?
So we see these as kind of like the 5 like key pillars of building one of these brands, and it's important to say that you don't if you're building one of these brands, you don't necessarily have to do all of them all at once, and you can kind of like, go into this world slowly, but we see this like any brand has the ability to do all of these things, and we don't think that it's going to hurt anyone's business. We actually think it's going to like help quite a lot.
And the next few sections are demonstrating how brands have used this to actually really use these tenets to actually really help their businesses.
Cool. So the first one is environmentalism. It's pretty simple. Making anything creates damage to the environment. So everyone is kind of acutely aware of that at this point, and I think that what's really important is for brands to be self-aware of that as well and kind of like address that head on.
The default consumer stance is to assume that sustainability initiatives are greenwashing until proven innocent. I think, it's like we see so many things that are eco and organic and blah, blah, blah. And like, I for one have become very skeptical of a lot of what that means. And so we call this substantive environmentalism because we understand that an approach that's based in like transparent a transparent approach to mitigating environmental risk is actually the difference here between convincing a cynical, burnt out consumer and actually doing your due diligence to create a sustainable company.
Yeah. So because this is like a little bit ambitious for founders to do on their own, we actually started a sustainability consultancy to help our clients and potential founders understand the embodied carbon in their products. And we work with environmental consultants and scientists on this work, and actually we decided that we wanted to prove that this work actually moved the needle with regard to brands and building leagues of loyalists and superfans. And what we did was we ran an ABC campaign on Instagram where
for a client,
for a real client called Millie Milk. They were making a dry shipped oat milk, so you add water at home. And what we found when we did our environmental study is that because it was shipped dry, the cost of transporting the oat milk was actually quite a lot less because it was so much lighter, per serve. So what we did was we came up with these 3 ad sets. So on the left is like generic, no sustainability messaging at all. The middle is what we understood to feel like greenwashing to us. And then on the right was what we were calling substantive sustainability. And in the section, in the comment of the social media feed, it also had like data, in these examples. And what we found was that the generic messaging is our control variable here with regard to click-through rate. So this is how many people clicked the ad. And we found that, for ages 25 to 34, actually the greenwashing messaging performed worse than the generic messaging, but our messaging performed 50% better than the control. And that was even more pronounced with regard to 35 to 44 and true of every age group except for anyone over 55.
And they click on everything.
So, you're kind of losing money not doing sustainability is kind of the take home there.
And there's a lot of brands who are doing it really well. We love the reference of Seed, who open sourced their packaging model. They use a sort of like wide variety of approaches to creating packages or creating packaging, and they were so excited about that they wanted to make it easier for other companies to do the same. So you can find out how to build, packaging like theirs on their website. Blueland is a brand that really puts sustainability at the center of their brand mission. You really can't shop at Blueland if you're not down with sustainability. It's just so baked into their ethos. Mill is a client of ours, and they've created this bin that it's so cool. You dump your food scraps in, and it dehydrates and grounds the food scraps up so that they are extremely light and not at all smelly. And then you can, dump them out into like a municipal compost bin from there. But we use it at Index, for instance, and we basically don't have food waste for a co-working space of 70 people, which is amazing.
Yeah. Or you can send your food waste back to them and they'll turn it into chicken feed. We think employer responsibility is also a big part of this. We think working is a political act. So by extension, so too is being an employer. So I don't know if anyone was on Twitter around this time, but the Basecamp CEO announced a number of policy changes, including that there would be no more societal and political discussions at the company, and about 1/3 of its employees resigned within a matter of days, and he issued an apology.
We don't do that.
No.
Yeah, it's really important to us that we act as stewards in best interest of the diverse groups of people that work at our company and help them thrive however we can. We mentioned our DEI report before. So these are some of the graphs from the data zone of our DEI report last year. So we think that, keeping, using data as a form of, standard setting and really as a form of care, because that data then can turn into policy and can turn into action within an organization. That's an approach that we've made to, trying to be the most responsible employers that we can.
Yeah, so we also like to talk about how it's important that wealth that's created at a company is shared, and one example is Managed by Q, who were an office cleaning company that I think were acquired by WeWork. But yeah, Managed by Q were famous for giving all of the office workers that would work and clean offices in New York City actually equity in their company, which is kind of insane in this gig economy. Most people are downwardly mobile when they work in gig economy jobs, but that was not the case with Managed by Q, and they sold for a huge amount of money, many millions. So, want to do this one?
Sure. Yeah. Transparency and aesthetic honesty. We've talked a lot about transparency. This aesthetic honesty part is about looking. It's about looking like you are.
Like you are.
Like you are, yeah. Looking like you are, exactly.
I mean, a big part of the millennial blanding stuff that we saw on the screen before was very much attaching a really sort of shitty made product to an aesthetic value that is sort of pre-linked with quality. And we kind of called it that period was giving a tin man a heart. A lot of those companies didn't really have any substance at all, and we would sort of try to make the visual case that they did through our work. And what we mean by aesthetic honesty is kind of not doing that, not being fake.
We actually found that like one of the things that really felt wrong to us was too much design, feeling like a real sort of telltale sign of a potential attempt to mislead the consumer. And so, yeah, this idea of aesthetic honesty and transparency is by saying, you know, that you as a company acknowledge that your work is a contribution to culture. It exists for the greater good. It's not perfect or magical, and it will never be finished, but it is down to learn in the open. And it wants its community's input, and the product will be better for it. So some examples of this are the brand Nugs. You know, they're like the non-meat chicken nuggets brand, or non-chicken chicken nuggets brand. And they have this changelog where whenever they make an update to their recipe, they publish it on their website. And so, you know, the same way that like an app on the App Store would have like what we fixed this on this last update, so they do as well. You know, elevated oil levels deliver a juicier mouthfeel. That's so cool.
Yeah, what sort of oils though?
Floyd is a furniture brand, and they acknowledge that one of their products, their bed, is so simple that you could just go to the you know, your local hardware store and get the plywood yourself. And if you want, they'll just ship you the like hardware to put it together. And so that's a really interesting way of saying, you know, you don't have to go through us, like you can just do this yourself. Organic Basics has this website called Our Fuck Ups, where they publish all of the times they've like aired as a brand, all of their mistakes as a brand, which is pretty interesting. And you know, there's what I think is so interesting about this is that there's really a humility, and I think in that humility, a confidence that brands are saying, like, you know, we aren't perfect. We aren't too fragile for you to point out, you know, a place where we've messed up and it all comes crumbling down. Like, we are strong enough to stand by our mistakes and to take accountability for where we can continue to improve.
We think charitable giving is pretty easy to do if you're making money. We also think that there is just like a general responsibility to acknowledge that a brand exists within a cultural context of like the world. And yeah, it's aiming to, it's like its core job is to extract profit from human beings. So we think like the bare minimum that it should do is give back. And we think that organizations that respond in real time to global events, to fight oppression, support volunteers, protect humans and ecosystems, just build leagues of loyalists and superfans faster than any marketing campaign ever could.
We're obsessed with Dr. Bronner's. I'm obsessed with Dr. Bronner's.
I am too. I follow them. I like love their Instagram.
I love it.
Yeah. Dr. Bronner's famously don't have a marketing budget at all. They're like a household name. They don't have a marketing budget. Instead, they have an activism budget. So any money that they would normally, like a normal company would contribute to marketing, they actually just like look for activist causes and contribute money to those places instead.
Dr. Bronner's CEO's wife like keeps getting arrested. It's so cool. Like she just like goes to DC to join various protests for political causes. And then this screenshot here is since 2000, Dr. Bronner's has been in an illegal battle with the FDA on who's allowed to use the term organic. Organic is not supposed to be it's not supposed to be an adjective. It's supposed to be, you know, something that very literally describes, well, I guess that is also an adjective. It's not supposed to suggest a marketing trend. It's supposed to literally refer to certain practices that a company is taking, and that is true for groceries and for food products, but it's not true for products in like the health and beauty space. And so they've been in a legal battle since 2000 trying to change that. And they publish, you know, kind of progress and updates on that on their website. Yeah.
So one of our early clients, Dame, they literally sued the MTA for sexism and won. And it was because like the MTA was very clearly allowing certain types of ads, and they're a sex toy company, and they weren't allowed to have this picture of hands holding one of their toys. But you see these like massive phalluses that Hims brand the fucking Subway with, and they won this, and now they've actually been putting dildos on a bunch of trucks and driving them around America currently. So they're sick.
We do a charitable giving program at garden3d. We published an article last year about how we gave away $63,000 since 2021. Our annual giving budget is 0.25% of our gross revenue, or 10% of our reinvestment budget, whichever is greater. And one of the really kind of interesting parts of this work is assessing together as a company what organizations are like valid for our charitable giving contributions. So we came up together with a framework. We came up in a working group with a framework for how to assess whether a company is eligible for our charitable giving donation. And that's based on like 4 pillars of need. Does it already have big donors, for instance? How great is this need? Transparency, can we audit them? Can anybody audit them? Effectiveness, are they able to help a lot of people? Can the success rate be quantified? And values, do their values align with our moral compass? So.
Cool, and then the final one is community first action. We also kind of refer to this loosely as localism, but that can be a little misleading on how we think about localism. Basically, we think that online brands can have a locality, even if that's like an internet local. And there is basically always another human being on the other end of the tube. And we just believe that all of these brands have a core responsibility to create safety and spaces for those people to gather, exist, share experiences, and build power together on the other side. So that is like, a group who are really into platform cooperatives or really into organic soaps. These are all like localities that we kind of consider as a brand, whether or not that's IRL or online. So
one example of a community first action that we've taken as a company is growing Index as a business. In 2015, our design studio 29 opened a physical space in the East Village, and it was a space to share studio space for one thing, and also to experiment with non-commercial design practices. So I was part of this space. We hosted exhibitions, we sold books, we had launch parties when our friends did something cool, and it was very organic. We didn't really have a clear mission at that time. It sort of just existed to play with what happens when you gather people in a space and the many different outcomes that can be experimented with in that way. And then, we had the space. We started our lease in 2015. The lease was up in April 2020, which was very convenient because nobody was getting together in person in April 2020. So we put everything in storage, and we really started to miss it, and not just the conveniences of a pre-COVID era, but all of that like lack of mission at the in the sort of early days of this work sort of started to become crystallized into a very real reason to gather our community. And part of that was, the understanding that we have so much knowledge and experience to share within our community, and everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. And so we created Index as a way for people to share knowledge, like through courses or ideas through artist talks or workshops. I think this screenshot is from a workshop that we did called Deep Sea Diving on the Internet, where we would pick a different platform to go deep sea diving into and sort of try to subvert the algorithms in order to pull up very random user-generated content on platforms like YouTube or even Zillow. And so they really got fun and weird, and we gave, just gave people a framework and a platform to share ideas for gathering. And then before we knew it, Index had become this community of 23,000 creative people all over the world, and they all wanted to hang out IRL. So we opened our space on Walker Street in Chinatown almost 2 years ago, and things are going really well, and we are at capacity, and so we thought it would be pretty fun to open a second location in Greenpoint, and really focus on supporting people's lives outside of work, not just here at work, because our space in Manhattan is very co-working centric. And so, Index Brooklyn will be open sometime this summer. Do not ask us when. Construction timelines are their own animal, and we don't have an exact date yet, but it will be the top 2 floors of this building here in Greenpoint. So we're really excited to bring more people together in that space as well. We founded Index because we wanted to really reflect the people in our community in New York. But there were lots of other creative communities around the world that also had needs for gathering in physical space. And we thought very hard and long about what it meant to grow and expand Index. And we weren't super interested in scaling in any kind of franchise way, kind of Soho House way. And so instead what we did was we created a program where anyone can come to us with an idea for a space that serves their local community. And it doesn't have to be a co-working space. It doesn't have to look anything like our space. It just has to be a physical space that doesn't exist yet, that serves the needs of creative people somewhere in the world. Every member of every existing Index node has a chance to review all of the applications for the grant, and whoever is selected gets a grant of $20,000 to $30,000 to open their space, paid for by garden3d. So this is what our nodes network looks like today. We have 3 in the US, well, including Index Brooklyn, which isn't open yet. We also have a space in Richmond, Virginia, which just opened last month. We have a space in Amsterdam called Post Office, a space in Bengaluru called Lagori, which is a space that's really devoted to exploring anti-capitalist future research. And then a node in the province of Ishikawa in rural Japan, which is a kitchen and a place to explore local food traditions. This is just our ending slide. Just a couple of things that we've talked about today that I hope maybe kind of wrap up what we're trying to say. Product equals brand product equals brand, ad infinitum. And so what you make and how you make it are part of the same conversation every time. Leadership is a thing you do, and so how you do these products and these brands, or whatever else we work on, not being afraid to do things in ways that serve the values and the ethics that you want to be represented by the work. Don't wait for a brief to be made. Don't wait for a brief to make what needs to be made. Index and these kinds of, all of our organizational design, if we were waiting for someone to tell us, make Index, Index wouldn't exist, or garden3d wouldn't exist. And so, taking the initiative to respond to the world in real time is a really big part of what we think about. And none of it would be possible if we didn't have ways to find each other. So we thought it was, being in a school setting, that's why you come here, right, is to find each other. So we thought we'd just leave it there today. Do we have time for questions?
We do 10, 15 minutes of
Great.
questions.
Sure.
It's a good slide.
Yeah, you.
Hi. I'm really interested in this
thank you.
principle of the aesthetics of transparency.
Yeah.
And I know you talked about you have an arm that consults clients on how they can become more environmentally sustainable. Do you have any systematic way that you approach clients with this principle of aesthetic transparency? Because I imagine it's not always like built into their organization already.
Yeah, not really, no. I mean, it's kind of just like a point of taste, I think, at this point. I think that an aesthetic can be more than just like colors and typography, though. And I think that having an aesthetic that gestures towards like quantifiable studies around sustainability, like white papers or something to that effect, or building in, links or like really easy to understand infographics that do make the transparency aspect of what you're doing more legible, is the type of thinking that matters, I think, with aesthetics. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything you'd add to that?
I mean, like, what defines aesthetics is so hard. Like, one thing that comes to mind to me, like, is copy an aesthetic? I don't know. But like, I would say like, one thing that really signals to me whether a brand is honest with what they're saying is whether they're using like data and numbers to justify and back up their claims. So like, are they saying, we are like easier on the planet, or are they saying like our product contributes like this much less carbon than our competitors or something like that? So that's not really an aesthetic decision, but that is a decision that creative people help to make. And so I think it kind of falls within the purview of like the work that designers can do and the influence that we can have. And I think, art direction is another big one. Who's making your images and how? All of those signifiers are subtle ways that I think, we can signal to one another what we mean when we're kind of trying to position our products and our brands.
Yeah.
I have two questions. The first is, you kind of partially answered it, but like, I wanted to hear about your definition of greenwashing and like what's that line between greenwashing and...
You know it when you see it. No, I mean, I think it's basically just like claims that aren't auditable and that aren't quantified. Stuff that's like hand wavy, stuff that is a statement about like, oh, this is organic, but like, wait, what do you mean? Do you mean it's the crop that's next to the one that you spray with chemicals and the chemicals kind of just float over in that type of way? Or is it like organic because it's like certified through this like specific certification that we actually stand by and have looked into?
We do have a greenwashing Substack series that probably has better definitions.
Greenwashing certified is a good one.
Greenwashing certified is a good one. Our Substack, if you're interested, is garden3d.substack.com. So this kind of details the landscape of greenwashing, and I think, if you read it, you'll probably be able to find some specific examples, I hope.
Yeah.
Did you have a second?
Second question is, earlier on the song you spoke about your team dynamics and this sort of stuff, and you mentioned that diverse teams actually make for better results, which is something that we've heard many times in our curriculum. But I just want to hear from you if you have an example of that happening, like within your team, like how that actually led to a successful outcome.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of the most like, when I was first starting to build user interfaces, it didn't occur to me that like the fields of first name and last name don't work for all types of people. And that like ever since then, I had a developer who pointed that out to me, and ever since then, we don't use the fields of first name or last name. We just use name, Like that's like a very sort of like obvious one that makes that product more usable for a certain group of people who aren't me. So you extrapolate that logic out, and if you have a diverse group of people building products for the world, then of course they're going to be more usable for everybody.
Hi, thank you so much for the insightful talk. I'm very curious about the physical space bit that you guys talked about, so I have a couple of questions. about that. I'm wondering if like when you switched from your online presence to the physical space, what are like sort of some of the challenges that you might have faced in terms of getting people over there, and what are sort of, I don't want to call it advertising or marketing, but like even like incentives and classes and workshops that you guys mentioned. How much of that did you have to offer to people to get more people in? If that makes sense.
So one of the things that made it easier to open the physical space is that we had about 6 years of running our space in the East Village, and then maybe 5 years in the East Village, 2 years just online. And so by the time we opened the physical location last summer, we already had like a bit of an Instagram following. And so we could get, some hype around the opening. People already knew who we were. A lot of the spaces that we are in touch with in the city who have opened before they really had a community like built already are finding that it's taking them a lot longer to reach profitability or even sustainability. And so I think that was like the biggest thing for us. And really the programming became the marketing for the space, because at our space we offer co-working memberships, everywhere from $75 a month to $720 a month. So huge range. And the most important way to convert new members is to just bring people in and have them experience what makes our space special. And if they have a good experience there, then that's way better than any like paid promotion I think that we'll do. So we really started thinking about the programs as marketing themselves. And so we don't really make a lot of money on our workshops and our courses. We split revenue 50-50 with instructors or facilitators. So, our time is covered, their time is covered, but really the benefit for us is getting more people in the space and expanding the community that way. So we've experimented like a little bit with Instagram promotion for various programs. We have an asynchronous course called Intro to Coding for Designers that you can take at your own pace, and we advertise for that on Instagram, which has the halo effect of just bringing more people to our surfaces. But it's never felt quite natural to us to do. We're kind of like, Index is slightly allergic to like too much branding.
Yeah, the only brand allowed in the space is on the refrigerator.
It says Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero refrigerators, they're so good.
So,
yeah. You had another question?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think you were next.
Yeah, so you were mentioning how you turned down a bunch of clients. I was wondering, before you decide to move forward or reject clients, do you have like a conversation with them about the moral pillars that you guys have, or
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we will like treat everyone in good faith. So, yeah, I mean, we've turned down work that is connected to the diamond industry, but then we've also entertained work that is related to the diamond industry, and like the difference might be our assessment of whether the market activity is downstream going to produce more or less unethically mined diamonds, for example. So like we'll have a conversation with a client, we'll understand their perspective around like, the industry they're in, we'll kind of ask them good faith questions, and then we'll take that back to our group and have like a conversation about it. It's hard. We haven't been right every time, for sure. Did you have something else you wanted to add, or?
Oh, no,
That's
no,
good.
that's it.
Yeah, that's good.
I have two questions. It's like towards the point of like self-actualization
Mhm.
and making that space for your employees. Do you have any examples of that? Because when I think about self-actualization, like I don't think labor.
Yeah.
You know,
I
so
do not
it's-
dream of labor.
So it's adjacent to that. And also my second question would be like, as interaction designers, we are pushed to like take leaps of faith in our praxis and like how we practice design. And you guys took, I think, a lot of leaps of that, faith. So any like words of advice or like, pushing us, maybe looking for alternative methods of working and just practicing design.
Great questions. Self-actualization, should we start there?
Yeah.
I mean, you like to think of garden3d as a platform for doing things. I think that's a good place to start, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that like what we kind of mean by that is a lot of people who come to our organization are people who have gone through like the big tech meat grinder and are like kind of burnt out by it, and they're like, surely there's something else. And they'll find us, and we're like a small group, and we have like a lot of care and attention on building things that we think matter. So in a lot of ways, it's a place where you can come, you can get paid fairly, and you can kind of like do your work without feeling like you're sort of like part of this awful system.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, garden3d has all of these like ways that you can sort of like bring an idea to the group and then peel off and become a champion of that idea. Like, there's been people who have like proposed like a space that they want to build in Richmond, Virginia, or they want to champion a policy that sort of like fundamentally changes the workplace. And those things that just aren't really possible in a regular job. This is like a platform for doing things. And if you want to do things and feel actualized through that, we aim to give people as much of that sort of raw agency as possible. So that's what we mean by that.
For me, as an employee, it sort of means like seeing myself within the organization, like rather than like feeling like I'm conforming completely to like a pre-existing culture, like finding ways to shape and form the organization in ways that inspire me or in ways that could support me. So that makes me feel self-actualized, but I can only speak for myself.
And I think to answer your question about like how do you push your practice forward to like take more risks, I think like there's a very sort of like obvious logic that is kind of rejected, I think, by traditional business logic, which is that like when you see something that sucks and doesn't make sense, like don't do it. Like for example, like I think that let me put this in a different framing. I kind of feel like, how like parents will be like, oh, don't start a restaurant. Like it's really risky to start a restaurant, So we go into the idea of starting a business with this idea that it's fundamentally really risky. So we approach like interacting with business in this kind of risk-averse way where we're like, okay, I'm gonna make the jump. I'm gonna start a restaurant, but I'm only gonna serve spaghetti because everyone loves spaghetti, and like, then you sort of like get this reputation for being like, oh, all they do is serve spaghetti, but you didn't choose to serve anything else because you like didn't take the risk. So therefore they sort of see within the lack of risk taking that there's essentially an inauthenticity to that, right? Like the most authentic thing you can do is be like, that shit sucks, I'm gonna do something else because like, that sucks. I'm not gonna make it, people want more things than spaghetti. Like that sucks. So I think that like the reason why businesses fail and the reason probably why people have lackluster careers is because they don't take risks, because they play it safe and like nothing that they do is notable. And I think that there's an authenticity to being like, I'm driven by how much the status quo sucks and I'm gonna do something that I think is better. And I think that you'll have more success that way. And I think that us turning down all this work, for example, has only brought us more work, because we stand by like a certain type of politic that people gravitate towards. So like I think that $1 to $3 million we've turned down has been like $4 to $6 million in like new business we wouldn't have gotten, for example. So yeah, I think that's how I think about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2 more questions?
2 more questions. Yeah.
I have 2, one more technical than the other.
Cool.
So let's start with that one. As way more associates join for garden3d, how are you managing the equity share? And then, do you see the no PM culture as something you can preserve as you guys grow? But that assumes that there are plans to grow garden3d as like a 30 to 40% company right now, because the breakdown I've seen is usually past like 50 people.
Yeah.
Like, is there plans to scale, and if so?
Do you want to take one and I'll take 2?
Yeah, one was how does equity kind of get dispersed? It's really simple. We have like, so garden3d LLC has a phantom equity structure so that we can include people who are overseas and aren't US citizens. And that is 80% of the overall sort of like amount of equity. I currently own 20%, but as more people join past, I think it's about 9 people, the math is such that I get further diluted out of my 20%. and like the 80% grows to like 85 to 90, and sort of like slowly the balloon expands at a slower rate so that it can have more people. So yeah, basically, I'm never going to be divested out, but hopefully my amount goes so small that it's just fractions of the pie for everyone, and it's vested over 4 years. So like, yeah.
Is that something you open source?
We should. We'll write about it at
We've
some
been
point.
asked to, yeah. We haven't gotten to it yet, but it's actually pretty standard. It's just my lawyer like wrote me an email that was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like, I've never had anyone give away this much equity," and I was like, "Please give
Also,
it away."
though, like, standard for whom? Like standard for people who know about like these things, but there's so many people who don't. So
Yeah.
I think it's worth writing about.
Sure, we'll write about it for sure.
Project management. So there's a lot about garden3d that does kind of necessitate lack of scale, smallness and tightness. But it's also true that like humans thrive in structure, and it is kind of unmooring to have to navigate the process of running creative projects without management experience, or just to be kind of pushed into that for better and for worse, because projects don't always go as planned, and you really need to be able to respond in real time to that. So the basic structure of a project at garden3d is that you'll have a creative lead or a tech lead, so that's the craft person kind of most responsible for delivering the project. You'll have a project lead, and so that's the person who's most responsible for managing the project, and you'll have various individual contributors. And so the project lead is the person who's responsible for continually like managing the budget, managing the resourcing, managing what's expected every week. And pretty much everyone has a chance to work in that capacity at our company. I think everyone probably has at this point. But what we found was that we needed to create better systems for our team to like thrive in those roles. So we hired a director of project delivery, and it's that person's responsibility to essentially create systems and leadership skills and upskill all of those people everyone at the company who's going to be running projects. So everyone has the same financial literacy, the same understanding of like what to do when this happens, and just the same basic project management skills, and knows who to go to when things go awry. So we think that one way of avoiding needing to create unnecessary levels of management within each project is to just create better systems for like mentorship and upskilling in those roles, and to just support people in doing those jobs better.
And yeah, when we add leadership, we think about it in this sort of like bottom-up way, where like if there is leadership or people in these director roles, they're like at the bottom of the bridge, like they're kind of the structural piece of the bridge, and then like the people doing the work are at the top. So we just kind of like invert the pyramid. There was one last question, and then I think that was over here. No? Okay. What's your question?
I think it's pretty simple. It's around the idea of having this equalitarian like business structure and splitting the profits and the faculty and all that. And it's around how do you manage like the sales employees. So usually I feel like the sales employee, with the sales employees, the incentives are aligned, right? So they work, they bring more business, they earn more. Do you still do it like this, or do you also rearrange it in a structure, a different structure?
Pretty much all of our business since our founding has been inbound. So just people emailing us, asking us to work. We do have like, we just hired a director of new business, but most of what she does is field inbound as opposed to outbound sales.
Okay.
So we've been really lucky like that. We are trying to get better at it, but yeah, I don't know. We see it as, because we're a profit sharing entity, and if you're someone who like is traditionally involved in the business process, you're incentivized to win more business because your life gets easier with more business, and then also you make more profit for everybody. So yeah, it's just kind of part of a role.
So
basically.
if you had one like outbound sales guy, you probably would keep the structure and not do it like as an incentive structure.
Correct. We'd probably keep it how it is, and sort of just like maybe, I mean, one sort of like lever we've used in the past is to create smaller pools inside of the profit share program that people have access to on a sliding scale based on their performance in certain critical roles. So like, let's say that you are the director of new business. If you're able to create much more lead growth year over year, then the team sort of decides, okay, this person should be funneled a little bit more of this profit share pool, this sub pool inside of the pool. So yeah, but it's all sliding scale and based on.
And again, that was a decision that we made together using an experiment, to decide if it was, something that we all aligned on.
Yeah. I think we're running out of time. Is it quick? Is it a quick one?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just interested to know how you position yourselves and pitch to companies because you do a lot of things.
Right.
It's interesting.
Well, we have a lot of brands. So if you go to any of the brand websites, they just do one thing well. So like a lot of people only know about one of the brands. They don't know about everything we talked about. A lot of this is just internal stuff. We're trying to tell this story to people because we think we have a lot of agency as creative people to create better systems of equity inside of companies. But yeah, we don't market ourselves like this, like to our clients. We just say we're good at design, we're good at development, like a regular agency. Yeah.
Thanks for the great questions, everyone.